Do you want to be married till death do you part? I mean, that is the point of this whole marriage game, right? To keep it going for as long as you both shall live and beyond. Most married couples definitely have that as the initial intention, but somewhere along the way, that thing gets lost and many end in divorce because of it. Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting, a show where we focus on helping dads become better family leaders. I am your host, Vidal, and today we are focusing on the topic of marriage. So my wife and I just celebrated our 14th year wedding anniversary, and on this episode, I want to give you 14 lessons that I've learned along the way that have been a game changer to strengthening our marriage. Something we would have never thought possible as we were one court trip away from a divorce just in our second year of marriage. But we came back from all of that using the tips that I'm going to share with you here. You're especially not going to want to miss lesson number 7 because I don't think it's something your marriage counselor or pastor will ever advise you to do. Let's go.
I can see the enemy approaching the battleground. Hear the drums pound like a thunder sound loud. I gather up my crowd to prepare them for what's coming. We've been summoned.
I remember the day of our wedding like it was yesterday. We gathered in the living room of our pastor's apartment and with about 20 of our close friends and family. And that's where we tied the knot. We were young and extremely broke, so we didn't have money for a big wedding. We also weren't on good terms with either one of our parents, which is why they weren't involved at all. There was no father-in-law fronting the bill for anything. It was just all of us. And we were happy with our humble wedding ceremony. But there was a huge mistake I made that day that led to a world of hurt in our marriage, almost causing us to end in divorce. And I'm going to tell you what that is so that in case you just got married, you don't fall into the same trap I did. But first, do you remember old school action movies? I'm talking Arnold, Van Damme, Chuck Norris, Stallone, like the real old school ones from the 80s and 90s. Good times, right? Well, I blame a lot of those movies for the mistake I made the day I got married. A lot of those movies followed the same premise. The good guy beats all the bad guys up, gets the girl at the end, and they get married. And they would do that weird thing where the wedding would take place during the credits at the end of the movie. So here's what jacked me up about all that. The movie was over when they got married, and you never got to see what happened to them afterwards. And this was me the day I got married. I had come to the belief that my movie was over. I had gotten the dream girl at the end, and now I could put this marriage on cruise control, and we'll be together till death do us part no matter what happens. I no longer have to try to woo her or date her anymore because she's already mine. Well, that false belief led me down a path of complacency and comfort, where all I did was play video games every day after work. I would ignore her and only seek her out when I wanted sex or something from her. I wouldn't take her out or plan things for us. You see, where I thought the movie was over, in her mind, she thought the movie was just beginning. So everything she got from me while we were dating, she thought, man, I'm going to get the 2.0 version of him. But instead, she got a downgraded model. This is when I learned the first important lesson. Your relationship starts the day you get married. From the moment you both say I do, your new movie is just beginning. So step it up and make it the best possible motion picture you can, because when the credits roll on this one, it's over. Now, to add some more input, I invited my cousin Junior to share some of his wisdom with you. Yo, primo, what you got on this one? Look, fool, many people think that when you get married, it's game over, homie. And like you can't have fun with your hyena no more. But guess what? If you think like that, she's gonna leave your ass, fool. And then it'll really be game over, eh? But if you look at it like this, it is the start of a new game and you play it cool, homie, then she's gonna wanna be around your ass all the time, fool. Like my hyena, she's always trying to be around me, fool. But she look good, so it's all good, you know what I mean? Thanks, primo. You always tell it like it is, man. So once you acknowledge that tying the knot is just the start of this thing, in order to make sure that the marriage works out for the long term, there's a certain blueprint you may need to follow. And this is where many men and women in a marriage tend to fail, especially in our modern day culture. They have a hard time accepting that there's a design on how to make it work. There are roles that need to be played within the marriage in order to make it function. And this is usually where the feminists turn into the girl from The Exorcist and their head starts turning all the way around. Yes, this includes male feminists too, because apparently they exist. Here's the thing. If you look at any team-based sport, like soccer, for example, keeping it real simple, you have the forwards, the midfielders, the defenders. One of those guys is the captain, and they all answer to the coach. Each player knows their role and plays to their strengths in order to make the team as a whole successful. Messi, who is one of the best soccer players in the world, is a phenomenal forward and midfielder because he scores goals. That is what he does masterfully. So why would you ever want to play him as a defender? Just doesn't make sense, right? So let's apply this now to marriage. I believe that a family man's role is to be the leader of the home, which means that he provides, protects, and makes the big decisions in the home to push the family forward. We as men are designed to be this way. We're wired to want to provide for our family and to protect them at all costs. We'll gladly give up our lives for them if we have to, and that's an amazing thing. And when you're not leading your marriage and your family as a man, everyone suffers. This happened to me as well. I used to put my wife on a pedestal and make it all about wanting to make her happy. And because of that, I became a pushover who didn't know how to make decisions. I would look to her to make them for us. Ironically, my attempts to appease her and make her happy were actually making her unhappy. And when you choose not to lead as a man, you are giving up a huge part of your role in the marriage. Now, many people will confuse the word leader with the word boss, and I'm here to tell you that they are not the same. Your job as a leader is not to boss your wife around. She's a grown woman who can make her own decisions, including the decision to trust and follow your lead. And I'm telling you right now, when you step into that role of a leader, she will want to follow your lead. But you got to know what a leader is, and here's the best definition I've found. A leader is a person who guides, inspires, or influences an individual or a group to achieve a desired goal. What does that mean? It means if you guide, inspire, and influence your wife and kids to achieve their desired goals, you're going to be a leader worth following. Which brings us to lesson number 2. Know your role in the marriage and step into it fully. Primo, you got something on this one?
Look, fool, if you ain't a firme leader, your hyena is not gonna want to follow you. She's gonna want to leave your ass because you're being a little bitch.
All right, cool. You get it. Moving on. When we were going through the thick of our marital issues, we were doing counseling with our pastor, and he asked us a question I'll never forget. He asked, what does it mean to be in love with someone? Now, I remember giving him some dumb answer like, it's when you care deeply for another person. But he said, no, that's not it. There's a very big difference between someone that says, I love the army versus someone that says, I'm in the army. When you're in it, you're committed. So when you're in love with someone, you're committed to loving that person. And love is a verb, which means it demands action. If you don't demonstrate to your wife that you're committed to loving her through the actions you take every day, that's when things start falling apart. And I'm not just talking to the husbands, but wives have to put in work too. Yes, that includes on days when you don't feel like it. If the vows you said to each other on your wedding day meant nothing, then what's the point? At the beginning, especially if you did it right and didn't start playing house before you got married, everything is exciting and you got all of those newlywed emotions. But after a while, the honeymoon phase goes away, and that's when the real test of a marriage comes in. How committed are you to each other? Was it a real commitment, or are you only committed until one of you messes up or doesn't make you feel good anymore? So you're going to bounce and get a divorce. Now, look, I'm not saying that sometimes a divorce isn't the right answer. Like if you're being abused and taken advantage of and treated like crap, I've seen some extremely toxic relationships where the man and woman are just not compatible, and I get it. But for those of you where that's not the case and you're just in a rut in your marriage, just because you don't feel that emotion you once did anymore, I would encourage you to take some action and show each other that you're still committed. Date nights, surprise gifts, loving gestures, laugh together, flirt with each other. There's so many actions you can take. Do something. But don't sit there and wait for something to magically change or get better without you taking some sort of action. Primo, what you got?
Spit some game, fool. Just because she's your wifey doesn't mean that she don't like it. My hyena loves it when I spit some game at her. It keeps things fresh, eh? And it leads to some things that lead to other things. You know what I mean, fool?
Keeping it G-rated as always, Primo. Thank you. I remember my wife telling me a story one time where she was hanging out with some of her coworkers and friends back when she was working in the corporate world. And she would tell me about how a lot of the girls who were married would badmouth their husbands. They kept making it a point to say that they were happy to be away from the home and all of their wifey responsibilities, the husband, the kids, and everything related to the family. My wife was just like, damn, is it really that bad at home? Have you told your husband that you're feeling like that? And they would just reply with, no, he doesn't listen anyways, and I don't want to talk about it. My wife could clearly see the call for help and the bashing, and when she tried to help, they didn't want it. It was hard for her to relate because at that point, her and I had worked through a lot of our issues, and we were solid. So the idea of bashing each other in the presence of other people wasn't a thing for us. If we had issues, we just went straight to each other and worked it out. I see this a lot where couples tear each other down behind each other's backs. And it's one of the worst things you could do to each other. What if instead of tearing the other person down in front of other people, you edify them? I always speak highly of my wife, period. Do we have a perfect marriage? No. And when we have issues, we work it out together. But at the end of the day, she's my ride or die, and I'm going to speak highly of her and her strengths all the time. It makes a marriage solid when you both operate this way because there's never any doubt in your mind that she thinks highly of you. That's a huge confidence booster for anyone. So lesson number 4 is edify each other, don't tear down, especially in the presence of other people. That's straight firme, homie. Don't talk smack about your hyena behind her back. Instead, talk about how she's the best hyena in the world. And that's gonna keep you out of problems, fool. Trust me. Well said, primo. Well said. Have you ever seen those reels on Instagram where some dude is asking random guys on the street, what would they prefer from a woman, love or respect? And what do the majority of them always answer? That's right. Men tend to lean more towards respect than wanting to be loved. Now, of course, we want both and we need both to really make a marriage work, but respect really makes you feel valued as a person. Let's look at the definition of the word respect according to dictionary.com. Respect is the esteem for or a sense of the worth or excellence of a person. So what does this mean in the context of a marriage? It requires you to hold the other person in high esteem and you show them that they have a sense of worth and excellence in your eyes, which means you don't do or say something to your significant other that will make her feel less than this. I've witnessed couples that argue and cuss each other out, yell and scream at one another like temper tantrum children. Some women that have no handle on their emotional intelligence that they result in trying to physically hit the man because they're so pissed off. And the man has to restrain her hands in order to not get hit. It can get really ugly when we throw respect out the window. And that's the principle here. Respect is a two-way street. You respect her, she respects you. And you're each responsible for setting those boundaries and having a healthy way of resolving conflict when any of those boundaries are crossed. Many men get emasculated and talked down to by their wives simply because they allow it to happen. They find it easier to appease her and not say anything because they don't want to have a difficult conversation. It's okay to speak up and tell her a line has been crossed, man. And if she gets pissed because you called her out, then let her be pissed. The marriage is not just about her, it's about the both of you. And you both get a vote on how things go down. At the same time, make sure you're operating with respect towards her so that she doesn't have a way to fault you for that. You can't expect her to respect you when you disrespect her all the time. Treat your hyena with respect, fool. That's gonna show her to treat you with respect. And if she's being disrespectful, don't be afraid to tell her ass that she's tripping, fool. But hey, do it respectfully, huh? Yeah, what that fool said. There was a time where I used to get really annoyed at my mom for saying this famous Spanish phrase, Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres, which translates to, tell me who your friends are and I'll tell you who you are. And of course, she would say this to me when she saw me hanging around some bad kids at school or in the neighborhood growing up. But as I got older and became an adult, I came to realize very quickly how true this phrase actually is. This principle is simple, but we make it hard to execute on. Watch the company you keep. If you want your marriage to be strong, passionate, and full of love and respect, then get around other couples who have a marriage that's strong, passionate, full of love and respect. If the majority of your friends are all single, well, when they invite you to hang out, chances are they're gonna wanna do single type of activities. I'll let you come up with the list of what that looks like. But let's just say they're not interested in being loyal to the wife they don't have at home. And if you're the only married one amongst your 5 single friends, you may be tempted in doing what they do simply because you don't want to be the odd man out. Don't put yourself in that situation. I'm not saying to not have single friends, but be aware of the company you keep. What does hanging out with your single friends mean? What sort of influence are they having on you? If the influence is causing issues in your marriage, then you may want to rethink that friendship. This also applies to you ladies if you're watching this. If you're hanging around with a bunch of sucias that are influencing you to play pretend single on the weekends, then you may want to rethink those relationships. I promise you that your husband doesn't feel good about it. Primo, what you got on this one? Look, fool, I know you like to kick it with the homies sometimes, and that's cool. But if the homies are doing stuff that's going to cause problems between you and your hyena, that's not a real homie, fool. Get rid of those fools. Puros espíritus malignos fuera. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. 2 of the most painful things I ever heard my wife say to me when we were having issues were, "You don't please me sexually, and I'm not attracted to you anymore." Yeah, it sucked hearing that. I'm going to get vulnerable here for a moment, so you'll either judge me or relate to me. Either way, I'm good with it. You see, my wife and I got married pretty young, and coming from the Christian church, we were doing things right as far as waiting until marriage to get down with the get down. So because of that, we wanted to get married pretty fast, and so we did. But we were naive in our understanding of sex and intimacy. This is probably a topic for another video, but I was introduced to porn at the age of 7. And it led to a shameful addiction for me for many years of my life, well into my marriage. So the extent of my sex ed was to do what I saw in the movies because, of course, the lady in the movies likes it, so my wife is going to like it too. That was a horrible approach, and it led to my wife telling me what I mentioned earlier. It wasn't until I actually started getting curious about what she liked and didn't like in the bedroom that our sexual intimacy got better. It was no longer this taboo topic we wouldn't talk about. And as I learned how to make the experience more enjoyable for her, the rejection and denial that I would get a lot of the times became a thing of the past. I can tell you that now, 14 years into this marriage, our sex life is way better than it was even when we were newlyweds and we had all the bubbly honeymoon emotions, right? Fundamentally, I believe that's exactly how it should be. Think about anything else in your life that you have a lot of reps in. Maybe you've worked at the same job for 10 years, so the work you do is like second nature to you. Well, if you've been married a long time, you've got a lot of reps in the bedroom with the same person. And that's a great thing. I think it's funny when people shame that. Like saying a one-night stand experience with a random stranger is better than with your wife who knows what you like and how to please you. They're tripping, bro. All that to say, if you're married and want your relationship to get stronger, here's the next lesson. Have a lot of sex. It's not the most important thing in a marriage, but it is very important. A lot of marriages end in divorce because they're in a sexless marriage where they feel unwanted and undesired. It's okay to desire your wife, and wives, it's okay to desire your husband. And it's also okay to show your husband how much you desire him. Whenever my wife shows me that she wants me, it makes me feel like I'm the man of her dreams. And trust me when I tell you, that makes a man feel appreciated in a marriage more than you can ever imagine. Junior, what you got on this one? If you ain't getting down with your hyena all the time, fool, you might get tempted to go look for another hyena outside of the marriage. And your hyena might do the same thing. I'm going to tell you what my pops told me when I got married to my hyena. He said, "Mijo, when it comes to your hyena, it's your duty to please that booty." And I just try to live up to that promise, fool, every single day. Real words of wisdom from my tío right there. So I have a lot of conversations with dads who are on a path of personal development. They're reading books, working out, bettering their habits, becoming entrepreneurs. They're doing big things and making big changes in their lives. And this is awesome. I love watching those changes in the men I get to work with and seeing their transformation. But what tends to happen a lot is they get frustrated when their wives don't want to go on that same growth journey with them. Due to that frustration, they start force feeding their wives with everything they're learning. Like, you should read this book, or you should be working out, or you should stop doing this or that. And they start shooting all over them. And here's what I've learned about this, because I've definitely fallen into this trap. Everyone grows at their own pace, and you got to meet people where they're at, including your wife. And here's what I've learned about this, because I've definitely fallen into this trap. Everyone grows at their own pace, and you got to meet people where they're at, including your wife. Yes, as a married couple, it's important for you to grow together. And that's the next lesson, grow together. But that doesn't necessarily mean it may happen at the same time. If you're one of these men I've just described, simply invite her to join you. But if she says no, don't get mad. You just keep doing what you're doing and keep setting the example. With time, she will come around. But if you keep trying to lord it over her, even if you're doing it with good intentions, it'll create resentment. And you don't need that in your life. Be patient and understanding, knowing that she may not have the same drive or urgency you have for growth. It's not because she doesn't want it. It just may not be her time right now, and that's okay. It's all right, fool. Don't try to rush it. Just be patient with your hyena. Just stay feed her, man. She'll come around. Wise words, primo. All right, this next lesson always gets me in trouble because people get sensitive about it. So before you get butthurt and make a judgment about this one, hear me out. If you've been married a while and you have young kids, you've definitely experienced this before. You're getting ready to go to bed, and it's looking like you and the wifey may be staying up a little late tonight doing the horizontal tango. But just as things commence, your kids come knocking at the door saying they had a nightmare, or they wet the bed, or some other godforsaken reason that has now interrupted your plans. More than likely, they are going to get in the bed with you and fall asleep right there with mommy and daddy. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not some cold-hearted bastard. My kids are still young and this happens for sure. And of course, we let them sleep in the bed if necessary, depending on what the situation is. However, from a very young age, we've sleep trained our kids to sleep on their own. When they're babies, they sleep in the room with us, but for the most part in their own crib. Not because we don't want them in the bed with us, but because we want to make time for our marriage. And I'm not just talking about intimacy. Sometimes the only time alone my wife and I get is when we're lying in bed right before we're going to sleep. And we have some of the best conversations in those moments. Kids are amazing and we love ours to death. But at the end of the day, the marriage comes first. If we're not making time for each other every day and connecting, it's going to be hard to show our kids what a strong marriage looks like. Think about it like this. When your kids are grown and they leave the nest, who's going to be left in that house? It's you and your wife till death do you part, right? I've seen many older couples fall out of love with each other throughout their marriage, all because they made the kids the primary focus for everything. They co-slept with the kids until they were 7 years old, which, whether you believe me or not, it's going to affect your intimacy. They put their kids in every activity available: soccer, dance, martial arts, baseball, music, after-school programs, etc. So they ran around doing everything for their kids, but neglecting the marriage the whole time, always putting it in the back burner until the kids left the nest, and then they were left with each other feeling like complete strangers because they didn't prioritize the marriage. If you say you love your kids and will do anything for them, then show them what it looks like to have a strong marriage by prioritizing the marriage. It doesn't devalue them. Instead, it shows them what to value. And when they grow up and have a wife or a husband of their own, they'll do the same thing. My hyena is my ride or die, fool. I'm with her till the end. Our kids, as much as we love them, are gonna grow up and leave us one day, fool. And if you put your hyena first, she puts you first, your marriage is gonna be firme, homie. Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that one. So why is it that some married couples fight over the dumbest things? Like, you're fighting over the damn toilet seat being up or some dishes not getting washed. It's so petty, man, and unnecessary. But here's the real truth about what's going on. The argument you're having is not about the toilet seat or the dishes. The real reason you're fighting is because you want to be right and you want the other person to admit that they're wrong and you're right. This is literally one of the biggest reasons why fights between couples happen. They both want to be right and neither one of them wants to be wrong. Well, you want to learn how to fight less as a married couple? Stop trying to be right. That's the next lesson. If the toilet seat is up and you're upset because of it, solve the problem and put the toilet seat down without an attitude. Then have a conversation about it. Hey, I noticed the toilet seat was left up again today, so I put it down. Can you please help me get better about that? We have a 1-year-old roaming the house. Don't want us to make it easier for him to take a dive in the toilet. Now, of course, this is a hypothetical scenario I'm laying out for you. And yes, this is most likely gonna be coming from the wife to the husband, but that's okay because it illustrates my point. I learned this concept from a man named Richard Macias, who simply said, when it comes to problems in your marriage, always remember that it's you and your wife against the problem, not each other. When I first heard this, I didn't realize this was what my wife and I had been doing for years, which is one of the reasons our marriage got stronger. We stopped being combative over these petty issues and started figuring out how to be collaborative with the understanding that we're on the same freaking team. Don't lose sight of that in your own marriage. Figure out how to tackle problems together instead of against each other. Still to this day, fool, every time I go take a shower after my hyena, I get freaked out, because on the wall, there's this thing on the wall that looks like a big ass spider. But when I get closer, I realize that it's just a bunch of hair, fool. That used to piss me off so bad. Like, hey, why you leave your spider on the wall? But now I just calmly wipe it off if she forgets to do it. It doesn't trigger me, fool. Because at the end of the day, we are one flesh, So that's like my spider too, fool. Pinche spider. I got no words for that one, man. Let's move on. All right, I'm going to share something with you that I don't believe I share on the show too often. But my wife and I struggled to have kids. We went through a good portion of our marriage trying everything we could, from infertility treatments to all these tests we had to do, with my wife having to go through the brunt of it. And I remember one day getting home from work feeling defeated, wondering why it wasn't happening for us. I enter the apartment and my wife made this amazing meal for us and hands me a card. On that card, it says I'm going to be a dad. And there's an ultrasound pic in there. And it's one of the happiest moments of my life was me getting that news, man. A few weeks later, I get a call from my wife while I'm at work. And she says I'm bleeding uncontrollably and it won't stop. I'm scared something might be happening with the baby. I leave work immediately and we head to the ER. They run the tests. We stay there all night. And a couple of days later, my wife has to go in for a follow-up to confirm the baby's okay with another ultrasound. We lost our baby. We stayed in bed all day, just holding each other, dwelling in that sorrow, accepting the reality that having kids may not be in the cards for us. And growing up in the Christian faith, we both wrestled with God on that one, as we didn't understand it. We weren't mad at God and didn't blame him for it, but we couldn't help to ask why. Trusting in the fact that there's no such things as coincidences, we carried on. We stopped the infertility treatment and simply said, hey, if it's in God's will for us to have kids, then it'll happen. If it's not, then it won't. We're just going to keep enjoying our marriage and keep working on being good humans. A couple of months later, we're at my wife's OB getting confirmation of a pregnancy because she had taken like 3 tests and they were all positive. Close to 7 weeks pregnant. And we can hear our little man's heartbeat. Later this year, that little dude will turn 7 years old. Our second is going to be 4 years old. And our third will be 2 years old. You can try to take things into your own hands or you can trust the higher power. In my experience, when we answer to God as a married couple, we always win. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to believe in, but I witnessed 3 miracles come into this world that have proven to me that God is very real and we operate in our marriage accordingly. Yo, without the real OG up in the sky looking out for us, we ain't nothing, homie. Don't forget that, fool. So it's no mystery to everyone that the past 8 years or so, our country here in the U.S. has been pretty divided. Of course, politics has definitely played into that. There was a time when politics wasn't as in your face as it is now with social media and even the mainstream media. But I think the reason for the growing popularity in politics is not only the constant propaganda, but also the fact that many of the things that are being attacked are fundamental values. One example of that can be the topic of abortion and whether you believe it's right or wrong. Now, you may be saying, gee, why are you bringing up politics and abortion when we're supposed to be talking about marriage? Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is because values matter, especially in a marriage. You've probably heard it said before that if you're going to marry someone, make sure you're not unequally yoked, which means make sure you have the same values. Sticking with the abortion example for just a moment, let's say you believe that abortion is wrong, but your wife believes it's okay. And hell, let's say she's done it before a few times already in previous relationships she had, so she doesn't think it's a big deal. Now imagine she gets pregnant with your baby and it was completely unplanned. She's a career woman who's in the middle of a big promotion, and having a baby right now is not the right time. So she decides without telling you that she's just going to go and take care of it right after work. She doesn't think it's a big deal because she's done it in the past. And because you're her husband and you should be supportive in every decision she makes, you're not going to be mad about it. Hell, she may not even feel the need to tell you because, of course, it's her body and her choice, right? Would you be okay with your wife doing this if you were in this position? Now, I know for me, this would kill me. Which brings me to my whole point here. The values you and your wife share need to align, or else you're in for a hard marriage. Ideally, you're going to want to know that you align on values way before you even pop the question. Many men make the mistake of overlooking these things early on because they're blinded by all the emotions you get at the start of a relationship, especially if all you're doing is having sex and you're not actually getting to know each other at a deeper level. I've talked to guys whose marriages ended in divorce because of misaligned values, and they say things like, I thought she believed the same things I did, or I thought I could change her. It's delusional to think you align on values when you never even really talked about them, or when you think you have the power to change her. Like you're freaking Tony Robbins and you're magically going to cause her to change. Look, fool, if you're Jaina and you ain't on the same page when it comes to your values, then at some point it's going to cause problems. And you don't want that drama, fool. So make sure you tell each other what's up. Have you ever had that friend who's always bringing up stories from the past? It's almost like the best years of his life happened in the past and he's just stuck there. Like he hasn't done anything else with his life, which means he hasn't really changed. He's still the same old dude. Well, if you're like me and you believe that the life you have matters, then you would probably agree that being the same man you were 10 years ago is probably not a good idea. The point of this whole life is to continually improve, to continually get better, which means that change is inevitable. And that's the next lesson. If you're going to keep trying to better yourself every day, you're going to change. If you're not going to try to keep bettering yourself every day, then guess what? You're still going to change, just not for the better. Now, within the lens of marriage, this is also true. Change is inevitable. You and your wife will change every year that you're married. Accept that. You may change physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and in so many other ways, but it's within your power to make sure that you're changing for the better. That you're giving your wife a better version of you every single year, not a worse one. It's your job to lead in that. You can't force her into forward-moving change, but you can influence her by being the example and inviting her along as you keep getting better together. One of the most cliche, common pieces of marriage advice you hear in almost every marriage counseling or therapy session is that to make a marriage work, it's all about communication. It gets old hearing that. I mean, yeah, it sounds smart and fancy, like you're actually giving some great advice, but no one ever defines what they mean when they say communication. What does that actually mean, and what does it truly look like? To unpack this, let me share a story with you. I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, there was a show called The Wonder Years. And it was centered around this teenage kid navigating the typical teenage life, from girls to parents to sibling rivalries and everything in between. And on the show, the kid's teacher was played by a man named Ben Stein. He was a funny character on the show because Stein had one very unique superpower as an actor that he brought to literally every role he played. He had an extremely monotone and boring voice. You couldn't tell if the dude was happy or mad because there was never any emotion in his voice. So why am I bringing this up? Well, it's because Ben Stein is a perfect example of how not to communicate with your wife, even though many of us actually do this all the time. You see, communication is not just about what you say, but it's about how your wife receives it when it's happening. And in order for her to receive whatever you're saying in the best possible way, how you say it matters the most, because how you say it holds the meaning of what you're actually saying. For example, you can say to your wife, "Love you, babe." Or you can say, "Hey, babe, I love you." Hear the difference? The first one is bland, monotone with almost no emotion. The second one has emotion in it. And your wife has a subconscious superpower that can pick up on that emotion. She can tell when you're saying something just to say it versus when you're saying something you actually mean, just by your tonality and the way you say it. If what you say and how you say it makes her feel safe, seen, and heard, she is going to appreciate that type of communication so much more. And it will make your marriage better. So before you communicate something to her, think about how you're gonna say it. Yo, Junior, you got anything on this last one, man?
Just be smooth, fool. Put a little salsa on them words when you're telling her something. Don't be all boring, homie. That's your lady right there. Make her feel every word you say. Ponte las pilas como el puro pinche chente, fool.
Great words of wisdom once again from El Primo Jr. Now, of course, there's more than 14 lessons that I've learned from 14 years of marriage, but these are some of the most life-changing ones that move the needle forward for my wife and I. May they serve you in your marriage so that you keep this thing going till death do you part. And if you're needing some more help with your marriage, check out this video right here.
1, 2, 3 actions I didn't meet. 4, 5, 6 fear and silence begin to mix. 7, 8, 9 the thought of being emotionless started taking over my mind.